Hi there. Welcome to Cabaret Corner, a series devoted to having meaningful conversations with leaders in both the cabaret and Broadway communities. I'm your host, Ari Axelrod, and listen, I am beside myself with excitement to welcome to the corner today's guests, two-time Tony Award winner Christine Ebersole and her music director, the brilliant Larry Yurman, who was also the music director for Broadway shows like Warpaint and Grey Gardens, and recently he was the music director for Chasing Rainbow's The Road to Oz at Paper Mill Playhouse. We had so much fun. Maybe a little too fun. No, that's not possible. We had so much fun having this conversation. And at the end of this interview, stick around for a treat, if you will. A never before seen arrangement. Christine and Larry have generously recorded a never before heard arrangement that they are debuting here on Cabaret Corner. World premiere here. They were going to include this arrangement in a concert that they did before the coronavirus pandemic hit, but life happens. So instead, they have generously offered to premiere it here. So enjoy the interview and stick around at the end to watch an Ebersole and Yurman original arrangement exclusively premiering here on Cabaret Corner. Enjoy! Hi, Christine. Hi, Larry.
Hi, Ari.
Hello.
How are you both doing?
Fantastic.
Doing well.
So, where are you in this pandemic? Where are you socially distancing from?
I am in Beverly Hills. Beverly Hills, LA. That's where I am.
I am in on the Upper West Side.
That's so nice. Well, thank you so much for being here. The hope of this
Mm-hmm.
Cabaret Corner is to, cabaret's been dying. It's a dying art form, and it's been dying, since it's been around. But my hope is to get people to stop saying that it's dying by having meaningful conversations with leaders and change makers in this art form. So, if I were to ask 50 different cabaret artists to define cabaret, I would have 50 different definitions. But I'm curious, how do the two of you define cabaret?
Oh no.
There's no wrong answer.
Um, I think it's storytelling and song. That's the way we've always done it. Right, Larry?
Indeed. I mean, if you're just talking about what our process is, it would be that the need to tell the stories, and ideas flow from the stories. Music ends up,
And the
bubbling up.
stories inform the music, and the music inform the story. They're intertwined in that way.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, in that regard, for you, Larry, I'm curious, what is the difference between the role of a cabaret music director and the role of a music director in a Broadway musical? The role shift.
Yeah, yeah. I've enjoyed both of those roles. Um, the it's sort of it ends up one of the elements being this difference in size that in a theater piece you're trying to you are collaborating with many, many different people, many different worlds, and you're sort of trying to find this ultimate, uh, homogeneous world where the music is an element that enters into so many other elements included. And the thing that I enjoy very much about the cabaret world is that it is myself and the artist that I am working with, the singer, in this case, Christine. Um, it's a one-on-one relationship. It's much more intimate, and ultimately, honestly saying, you get to have more of a say. You get to have more of a collaborative event. It's really just 50-50. It's not,
Right.
a smaller slice of the pie. So,
And I think from my end,
Yeah.
the difference is that I'm not the character I'm playing is me.
Right.
It's one more element that's cleared away. And I think that's what makes it ultimately, for me, the most fulfilling art form. I think it's the most challenging art form, but at the same time, it's the most, in the end of the day, it's the most fulfilling art form because you have the most creative control over all of it.
What do you think makes it so challenging?
Because you don't have anything to hide behind, there's no character, there's no wigs and no character to hide behind,
Right.
or no script. The script is your life, your experience. That's the script.
Yeah.
And it's not, you're not playing somebody else. And I think there's a safety in that. You can just sort of like not hide behind it, but just kind of go inside of it and be protected in that. With cabaret, there is no protection in that way. It's just you're only protected by the truth of the experience.
Right. And so, how did you get into cabaret in the first place? What was your entrance into the art form like?
It was when I was doing Camelot opposite Richard Burton. It was 1980, and my dear friend Eddie Stone, who is no longer with us, he's somebody I grew up with, and he came up with the idea. He said, "Let's do a cabaret show." And so he wrote it and directed it and put it all together. And my musical director was Mark Shaman, who was 19 years old.
Oh my God.
And, yeah.
Whoa.
And it was, I had 3 backup singers, and we did it at Ted Hook's on stage. And it was kind of the beginning of that for me, of this whole new world that I had entered in that I just knew nothing about.
Yeah.
Well, I had done it before. When I first went to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, I was approached by Marty Henney, who was a piano player he worked at the American Academy teaching the dance classes and the singing classes. He was the accompanist. And he came up to me and he said, what would you think about singing in clubs? And I think we were discouraged from doing that at the Academy. They wanted us to just be straight up students. But I went along with it, and we went over to his house. I think he lived in New Jersey, and we came up. It was all these, I guess I'll hang my teeth up to dry. Spring can really hang you up the most. I mean, those kind of songs, And so at 20 years old, I sang in my very first club act that was at Gypsy's on 58th and 1st. And it was that kind of a night. But there's a difference, though, because it was really with Eddie Stone in 1980, there was a narrative to the night. You see, where this one was just like, for my next number, you know, there were no storytelling. It was just kind of, you know, straight up singing. So that was the difference.
What about for you, Larry? How did you get involved in this art form?
You know, as a pianist, I think pianists who do this will probably relate. You end up being more of a soldier of fortune in the world. As a pianist, you look for work, you look for opportunities. In my case, I think I can probably even make some connection in my life. The two elements of my education when I was in college, and I was a composition major. The thing that I liked to do best was write for singers, and it was very academically sort of, that was the sort of the world that I was living in. It wasn't theater specific or directed, but I liked writing art song basically and setting poetry.
Ooh,
who knew this, right?
yum.
And the other
I
thing.
never saw any poetry, Larry.
Well, no. Let's go. And I also I was a secondary piano major, I guess. Or I don't even know if major doesn't really apply. I did a lot of work, sort of as a pianist. I ended up accompanying a lot, instrumentalists as well as singers. And then ended up taking an ad hoc course in accompanying that was given by a lovely man who eventually worked at Westminster Choir College, passed on since, but he gave a bunch of interested pianists sort of a whole sort of philosophy of what it was to accompany, and talked about the collaborative element in accompanying, and that as accompanists, you shouldn't consider yourself wallpaper. You shouldn't consider yourself in the background. You are collaborating with the artist, in a more complete way. And I think both of those elements, the writing aspect, which I didn't necessarily pursue once I got out of school, but the creative spark, the interest in being creative, never left. And I think once I started working with singers, I gravitated into theater because I felt like as a composition major, that composition was a very potentially solitary world that it hit me. It's like, I don't want to be living on grants, and I had this piano ability, and so let me see what I can make of it. And I liked working with singers. And so eventually sort of theater became the world that I was inhabiting. But I would always say, well, I don't write as much anymore, but my creative spark is satisfied by arranging, realizing that I could actually arrange for singers, and then end up accompanying them as well. So both of those elements, the creative aspect and the accompanying, eventually took hold. And you work, and then going back to where I first started, where talking about this, you look for opportunities, and opportunities sort of bubble up, and some things lead to others. And I think I played some classes, sort of larger master class type situations where I got to meet singers. And those were the first fledgling encounters with the art form of cabaret. And there it all sprang, but it was certainly a tiny seed back then. And it grew. And here I am with this oak tree that I play with.
Amazing.
Well, but I just have to say though, when you were saying what that teacher was telling you about that you weren't wallpaper, that you were, that really resonated with me, because I can't tell you how much Larry is continually informing me of my interpretation of song by his amazing arrangements. I mean, it just, and then just the things that we do together, Larry, that how the arrangements kind of like grow out our collaboration. But it's just, it really is a collaborative art.
Right. And, and Christine, not just because she's here with us, but she has represented the peak for me as somebody who gets me, who inspires me, and that we can live in this creative place and collaborative place with great ease.
Yeah.
I feel the same way about Larry.
What were the
It's
chances?
the Mutual Admiration Society.
This is so wonderful. So a lot of people have talked about how the relationship between performer and music director, specifically in a cabaret, is very much like an artistic marriage.
Yeah.
It's can be decades long, and sometimes you need time apart. But I'm curious, for the two of you, what does this relationship look like? What value has it brought to your personal life, your artistic life?
A great amount of value to my artistic life, without question. And I always find it difficult to choose, if I am asked to choose, what do you prefer more, conducting a show in a theater or this collaborative cabaret experience. But there's really nothing like, what the cabaret experience with Christine allows me to do is be creative, really using the skills that I try to hone, and probably going back to what my initial desires were as a writer. But now I fulfill in this way, and she is the conduit. She's the sort of the yin to the yang. There's nothing greater than that. I like being a vessel in an orchestra and sort of dealing with on the stage and all, but in essence, I'm sort of an instrument as well in that whole setup. Here, I feel like I'm an artistic voice. That's
Partner.
different.
Yeah. And it's so funny because just because of the situation that we're in, my daughter was asking me the other day, in a perfect world, what would you be doing? And I said, singing. And that's really, when Larry and I were talking about it earlier, going forward, there's still, we're still able to access our creative lives without any kind of restrictions. You understand? I mean, there's restrictions with, performing live with an audience and 6 feet and all that kind of stuff. And who knows how that's going to roll out. But in terms of being creative, that part, there are no restrictions in that way. And how, like being able to record, to go back in the studio and record, and just kind of getting back to square one of just like the Noel Coward album that we did in 2009 or 2010, where it was just me and Larry. That's it. There were no other instruments. It was just the piano and my voice, and that was it. And it was I feel that album was very complete and very realized. It didn't feel like there was anything missing.
Totally.
And I think in a way it would, we could definitely, begin again in that form, in that format. There is no restriction there. Right. There's no law against it.
It's the freest that I ever feel when I'm just working. And I as much as I actually love and, there's a great enjoyment in a rhythm section or in 4 or 5 pieces that you play with, but the singer piano dynamic, if I'm able to play with somebody, it feels like all options are on the table at any time. I can feel it in the moment without worrying about keeping others together, and there's just that. It's total freedom that way, working with her.
Yeah. So what what does it look like? What is, a rehearsal with Larry Yurman and Christine Ebersole look like? And what does it feel like?
Well, it involves babka.
Chocolate or cinnamon?
Probably chocolate.
Both. Well, it's chocolate. It's definitely chocolate. But
I just
we'll
spoke to
go for
myself.
either. But yeah, that's what it generally involves. It starts with the babka, and then it goes from there.
See, I enjoy the excuse of going out to Maplewood, seeing Christine. I will stop in at Fairway first and find a delectable to bring
Yum!
with me. And so I try to be that person bearing the gift of food so we can have a
And
little
we
coffee
supply
clutch.
the coffee.
Do you supply the coffee?
Yes.
I love it. No, that's so perfect. It's the the Gentiles have the drink. The Jews have the food. Have
Food.
some drink.
Oh my God.
It's the perfect pair.
It really is. It's one of the few desserts that we members of the tribe do very well. We normally
we call it a main course where we are.
We like our briny, salty foods because it has the tears of our suffering ancestors. But babka, that's one sweet thing we did very well. We got that right.
True.
So I'm curious about the medley that you do, Christine, as a love letter to your children's birthdays.
Right.
I saw you do it live at 54 Below, and I just listened to it again, and I was driving my car, and when it came on, I had to pull over and wept for the duration of the entire medley. What was building that medley like? Because that's really it's an opus. It's a love letter and an opus. But what was it like to build that?
Well, I think I brought Little Green to the table, and Larry brought Wait Till You See Her. Isn't that right, Larry?
Yeah. I'm just trying to.
Because I didn't really know that song. I did not know Wait Till You See Her. I didn't know.
Okay. Yeah, you're probably right.
And there was a third song that
couldn't have been anybody else.
No, there was a third song that you had brought into the mix, and we eliminated it. And I don't remember what it was, but remember that? It was just kind of like bringing these things to the table, and then just honing it, and just marinating it.
I know. Yes, I did bring Wait Till You See Him, and because
you did. I didn't know it.
Right, and because
it was so perfect. It was such a perfect mix. I mean, unbelievable, unbelievable.
It was because of the recording of Barbara Cook, Wally Harper's arrangement of Wait Till You See Him.
Ah, okay.
That I've had known for years, and
I didn't know it.
I was very taken by it, and beautiful. One of the Carnegie Hall concerts that they did, and so I sort of knew how magnificent that song could be from the memory of that, and felt like, we could do something wonderful. Yeah. And then
just combining those
the way that we found the connection between the lyric content and how it all related back to the story you told. That was a genius kind of evolution in your head.
It just deepened the experience. I mean, I always loved that song Little Green, but I never understood. I didn't know what it meant, really. I didn't understand that was a story about that when Joni Mitchell had a child and gave it to adoption, that I didn't understand it until I heard there were stories that came out 35 years after she relinquished her child, and she found her child again, so then I understood what it was, and it had resonated so deeply with me because that was my experience. I was on the receiving end
Right.
of that.
So, Christine, you're a mother of 3, and I think when we met, May was about to go to college,
Right.
and I'm curious, how has being a mother enriched your life, both personally and also artistically? How has it changed things for you?
Well, I think it really is. Family is really everything. That without family, I'm going to speak personally, okay? Without family, I have nothing, because all the awards, all the whatever, all the applause, it means nothing.
Right.
Because it's like it's not that it doesn't mean anything, but it can become hollow if you don't have family to sustain you.
Right.
And so it's a great equalizer, and it really I'll just say it's everything. It's everything. Family is everything, but that's nothing new.
Right. Right.
They talk about it in the Bible.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
That's the strongest thing that we have.
Even though
the strongest unit that we have is family. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious about, you talk about, Christine, you have a very unique technique when it comes to cabaret performance. I remember you speaking about the mic being the conduit that connects what is at the heart of the artist to the audience. Can you expand on that? Because when I teach my classes, that's one of the things that I talk about, and it often brings up this wonderful discussion about what is our purpose as an artist and how do we cultivate empathy with the audience. And it always comes back to that thing that you said about the mic is the conduit, and it's one of the things that makes cabaret so unique.
The other thing is, I think that the mic really puts cabaret at an advantage is that you are able to have these really quiet moments.
Right. That
when you're on Broadway, and from the era that I came from, when there was just floor mics, and even before that, with opera, there are no mics. So you can't have those really quiet moments because no one will hear you.
Right.
And that's the luxury of having a mic and a sound system in a cabaret. You can get really quiet and you can get really small and invite everyone into that quietness that can be very powerful, I think.
Yeah. When I asked you what you were reading, I think you told me you responded with one of your favorite psalms, and I know that your faith is so important to you. I'm curious, how has your faith played a role in your life as an artist?
Well, I think it's played a very important role because there is an acknowledgement and a recognition that the gift of singing was given to me by my creator. It's not something like, look what I came up with, it's not mine. It's really not. I mean, I am a steward of it. I am responsible to it, but the gift was given to me at birth. And it's quite a humbling acknowledgement, a recognition of that. So I think that that's how that's really informed me, because my responsibility is to that gift that was given to me. In other words, I got to take care of it. I can't spend all night drinking or whatever, smoking cigarettes or whatever. I got to take care of it. And the other responsibility is to share it. Because when you share the gifts and God gave them to everyone has a gift, or many gifts that were given. Everyone. No one got left out. They're different, but we were all given that. And when you share those gifts that were given, then everyone can connect to that gift. Everyone receives that, can receive that. There's an opportunity to receive that. And so that's kind of the unifying factor, that everyone can have a sort of a collective experience of something that didn't originate with me.
Right.
It came from above. So that then how it gets sent out, and people can have an experience that unifies. And that's the beauty of it, and it's very humbling. It's very humbling, because I'm grateful. I mean, I don't know who knows, I didn't have a say in it.
Right.
I didn't. I had no say.
Yeah.
And yet it was given to me. That's unbelievably generous, I think, of our Creator, which everyone gets something.
Yeah.
Everyone. Nobody gets left out, So I think it's a matter of recognizing that and understanding, where it comes from.
Yeah. Larry, we're both members of the tribe. We're both Landsman L'chaim.
Yes.
I've long been fascinated with the reality that the vast majority of musicals were written by Jews, with the exception of Cole Porter, John Bacchino, and Lin-Manuel Miranda, and maybe a couple others. But even Cole Porter said that he was stealing from us, and successfully.
Yeah.
What do you think it is about us, about our ancestors, that for some reason the country club of Broadway is, by and large, many of the tables are populated by Yids? Why is that? In your opinion, is it just coincidence?
It's not so much coincidence, but it may just be the particular life experiences and what people were exposed to from that culture, how it fed through these people who were creative, came up with stuff that was really great to listen to. I mean, they created great melodies. And the only, I'm not going to have a real either definitive or, smart answer to this. I've read a bit over time. The thing that sort of popped into my head when you were talking about this was reading about Harold Arlen, and the fact that he was the son of a cantor. And so being exposed and growing up and hearing cantorial, singing and keening somehow was inside of him. And when you coupled that with his creative drive, came out beautiful melodies and that were probably, somewhat inspired by or influenced by that world. I mean, and I think every culture sort of has that to give if you couple it with the right creative drive, because I would probably true for Lin-Manuel, you know, being Hispanic and you know, but what he brought to it with his creative drive between In the Heights and Hamilton, you know, is particularly very listenable, very enjoyable, and all within, you know, sort of influenced by the world that he grew up in. So, but you know, getting back to the Jewish question, I don't have a better answer than that.
Great answer.
It's just one of those things, though. You know, the Gershwins. I don't know that they were as religious, but they certainly were exposed to the culture.
Yeah.
You know, and so it was. You know, but of course, Gershwin was exposed to more the African American world too, as a result of where they were living initially in their younger years, and so that being exposed to jazzier elements and maybe, you know, in the throes of ragtime and beyond, being influenced by that. Irving Berlin as well.
Kurt Weill is the son.
Yeah.
A lot of
right.
it's a product of environment, surroundings, and kind of what you pick up either consciously or subconsciously.
You know, and I think, did I read this or did I actually see it on did you sing So in Love in your show?
Did,
yes. You told that story, but I know that I'd heard it before about Porter. That was his attempt to write a song in Jewish style.
Minor.
Right. So not only but those little turnarounds, which I don't know that you there he was sort of, you know, emulating that. And it was a big hit.
Huge.
Yeah.
And but he knew what he was doing. That's fascinating. Christine, I am similarly, the fact that there are so many. So you're from a suburb of Chicago,
right? Winnetka,
and the Calloway sisters, Jeff Harner, Karen Mason, and so many more in this cabaret world are from the greater Chicago area. Mm-hmm. Is it just coincidence, or what is it about Chicago that
it's in the water?
In that Great Lake water.
I know. I think I think the Midwesterners, they're honest people. Yeah.
Yes, we are.
They're honest people. I don't know. Maybe it's from farming. I don't know.
Well, there's an element of, you know, I think Dick Gallagher, his definition of cabaret was how to be yourself on purpose. And in doing that, there is this element of, if the audience is going to get on board with who you are and the story you're telling, you have to tell the truth.
Yeah, you can't have a pretense.
Oh!
It doesn't work.
No. So it makes sense that so many, I mean, Nancy Lamott was from Michigan, Rick Jensen's from Minnesota, I'm from Ann Arbor. There is this, it makes sense that Midwesterners are honest people. And if we have to tell the truth in an intimate space, it works.
Yeah, it does.
So your relationship together goes beyond the rooms that are, you know, smaller than a Broadway house. You have worked together on War Paint and Grey Gardens. Can you talk a bit about the experience of working on those shows and working on them together?
Actually, the first time that Larry and I met was when we got together to sing some songs that Larry Grossman had written. Larry Grossman and Ellen Fitzhugh had written for this musical called Paper Moon. So that was in 1993. And then it was 2004. When was the first time we got together for?
Oh, maybe 5 or.
Yeah, 2005 in Sundance.
Well, I didn't do Sundance. I came on board for playwrights.
Right.
So that would be 2006, maybe.
Well, yeah. Anyway, it was great working with Larry on those projects. I'm supposed to repeat the question though. What was it like working with Larry on those earlier shows? It was fantastic. What do you think, Larry?
I concur.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, Christine, you have on your website that you are you quoted somebody who says that you contain multitudes, and I'm wondering what does that mean to you to be someone who contains multitudes?
Well, I think maybe it means that I'm able to sort of absorb and observe what's going on around me. And I think I kind of always been that way. I've always been that way. I kind of came out that way. Yeah. And I think there's also a fearless quality that I have. I try to only fear God. And not fear man. But and I think the reason why I'm not afraid or am fearless in that way is that there's always seems to me a childlike naivete or innocence in my approach. And I think I will say my mother was just like that. My mother was like that. She would, whenever we would take a walk, she would always say, "Have you ever seen a bluer sky?" Stuff like that. She would just observe, like, look at the leaves on that tree. How do they do that? How do they know how to make that? It's like, or she'd be sitting at the table and she would be reading the paper, and the cat would get on top of her paper and just lie down on the paper and say, "How am I supposed to read my paper?" And then she'd say, "Cats belong in a barn," because she grew up on a farm in Pennsylvania. But then she would stop and say, "Will you look at those stripes on that cat? How do they know how to do that?" I mean, just like marvel. She was always marveling at just, the beauty of nature. And so I think there's like an innocence that comes from that. It's a childlike wonder. And I think that I maybe got some of that. Doesn't mean that I can't be jaded, but I think the approach is that. I think that's just sort of that wonderment of just, what's that? What's that? What's around the corner there,
Yeah.
I think that's why you hooked in so well to the arrangement of "Swonderful" that we do.
Oh,
because
yeah.
I remember talking to you about, I think the inspiration for that arrangement, that I took the idea of wonder, that it's not just wonderful, but it's the wonder of it.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So you, just from what you were saying now, it feels like, oh, that's why I think you connect so well to it, because you were on that same wavelength. And I really chose to want to see that song in a way of sort of like a newfound thing.
And also to be able to take it out of that box,
Yeah.
Conventional approach.
Yeah. Yeah. And
it was just like you opened up this whole new world. Mm-hmm. It's like, will you look at the stripes on that cat?
Right.
Things that you never thought you would notice, while you're reading the paper. But it's like,
yeah. So, I've been putting everyone in the hot seat for these interviews, and then I put them in the even hotter seat. Christine, if you were to sing 8 bars of your favorite 8 bars from any of your shows, a cappella, what would you sing?
I don't know. Larry, what would it be? Oh,
Well,
then, okay, here's what comes to mind is that the arrangement that Larry did of Lazy Afternoon is just crazy.
oh,
Oh my God.
well,
Yes, it is.
And combined with Yesterday's.
Mm.
That's something we did together, right, Larry? But just, but what then what Larry just goes, when Larry has at it. Have at it, Larry.
right. That was
Have
my
at it with the arrangement,
right.
So when it's like, whoa, okay, I'm on a rocket ship right now,
Now, and I don't want to answer for Christine, but what comes to mind for you, and I think I'm reacting to the extensive, conversation or response you had to Ari's question about your faith and all of that. The song that I think of so often, that it could be your theme song is "How Can I Keep from Singing?"
Oh, I know.
And
Yes, Larry.
right,
Yes, Larry.
that's
So beautiful.
yeah,
It's a beautiful hymn. It's a
yeah,
hymn.
right.
It's so good. It's so good. Okay. This is my favorite question on planet Earth, and this is the question that I will close this fabulous conversation with. It's for both of you. If you could invite 5 people to dinner, living or dead, celebrity or not, who would you invite?
Well, the first ones I'm thinking of are my mother and father.
Great. 1, 2.
I think Ari Axelrod, Larry Yurman, and me. That makes 5.
Great.
We would have such a good time.
Yes, we would. I agree.
We would.
Well,
I'll
that
bring
leaves-
vodka.
That's right. We'll provide the drinks.
Larry, what about you?
But now you've created a situation that anything that I answer is going to sound pretentious.
No.
It's like that was a perfect answer. It's so complete, very tidy. No, nothing outside the lines. And I think my mother and father would be a lovely thing to have.
Yeah.
To have. I mean, they both witnessed a lot of things that I was able to do, and but as I continued to evolve, it makes me think about, just that question makes me think about wanting to share the latest and to see how far that I've grown.
Yeah.
And outside of that, I think it's sort of, the curiosities of maybe composers that I have come up close to and have, been curious about or interested in, and they're all very eclectic and odd. So I don't know that I need to.
You got it.
Got it. Yeah.
Oh, just give us one name, Larry.
I would give you one, and it's just like, what?
Oh, go ahead. Be brave. We can always edit it out.
Yes, right. Because in the world of art song, people who I was just fascinated by over time, one of the writers was Peter Warlock. Peter Warlock, and that was a pseudonym for a gentleman by the name of Philip Heseltine, and he was sort of a turn of the century, 19th into 20th British writer, and he was actually a critic, but he was one of these people who wrote sort of in the style of, he got very interested in Renaissance composers and wrote in the style of, and actually even passed off I believe, some of his writing as if they were discovered works. But eventually, but he came up with this moniker of Peter Warlock that became his alter ego, and that was the composer side of him. But he wrote, some really beautiful, interesting, very like in a folk song tradition, very British or Celtic in style, but then also very out stuff that kind of looked more far-reaching, more 20th century, crunchy sounding stuff. But seemed like a fascinating person. So that's just one. But
that is such a great answer.
I don't know. It's just,
And informative.
Look at
very, very. Well, thank you so much for being here and having this conversation with me. This has been one of the highlights of this global pandemic for me.
Thank you, Ari. Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for saying yes and for being here.
When you're in love and you are wondering if he really is the one, there's an ancient sign sure to tell you that your search is over and done. Catch a bee, and if he don't sting you, you're in a spell that's just begun. It's a guarantee till the end of time. Your true love you have won, have won. When a bee lies sleeping in the palm of your hand, you're bewitched and deep in love's long looked after land, where you'll see a sun-up sky with a morning moon, and the days go laughing by when love comes calling on you. Sleep on me, don't waken, can't believe what just passed. He's mine for the taking, I'm so happy at last. Maybe I dream, but he seems sweet golden as a crown. Asleep and be done told me that I'll walk with my feet off the ground when my one true love I have found.